Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, where we will provide you fresh insights into South Asia's geopolitical, strategic and security situation. Let's take a look at the headlines first. India-US step up joint efforts to counter global terror threats. India remembers Pahalgam attack, renews call for justice and accountability. And UN Forum highlights concerns over forced conversions and abductions in Sindh. Pakistan's continued association with terror networks remains a major concern for global security, with repeated incidents highlighting the urgent need for accountability. As countries call for stronger action against states that shelter terrorism, India and the United States are stepping up coordination to counter these threats. From firm diplomatic messaging to deeper intelligence cooperation, both nations are reinforcing a shared resolve to combat terrorism. Take a look.
Pakistan's long-standing links to terror groups have repeatedly come under international scrutiny, with several outfits operating from its soil accused of carrying out attacks beyond its borders. Despite global calls for action, these networks continue to pose a serious threat to regional and international security. In this backdrop, India and the United States have significantly deepened their strategic partnership, expanding cooperation across defense, technology, trade, and global security, with counter-terrorism emerging as a key pillar. On the international stage, New Delhi and Washington are finding increasing alignment on major geopolitical challenges, from maintaining stability in the Indo-Pacific to strengthening coordinated responses against terrorism. This shared approach was evident at the exhibition, The Human Cost of Terrorism, organized by the Embassy of India, where US Congressman Brad Sherman strongly criticized Pakistan, describing it as a hub of terrorism and calling for firm action against groups such as Lashkar-e-Taiba. Echoing this sentiment, Sherman stressed the need for sustained global pressure on states that back terror networks, warning that incidents like the Pahalgam attack and past attacks such as the 2008 Mumbai attacks serve as stark reminders of the devastating human cost of inaction.
We have to fight the outrageous terrorist organizations which on April 22nd in your country killed people on the basis of their religion in Kashmir. Not to mention what happened in Mumbai many years ago. Our intelligence services need to work together, and we need to demand that those countries that shelter terrorists, including, unfortunately, Pakistan, clamp down on these organizations when they realize the human cost, which is illustrated in this exhibit here, where we see the individual lives that have been snuffed out by terrorist action.
The growing convergence between India and the United States on counter-terrorism is no longer limited to statements. It is translating into deeper coordination on intelligence sharing, security frameworks, and joint strategic planning.
The India-US relationship is extremely important economically, strategically, but also we have a kinship with terrorist attacks that have happened on our land, within our countries, and we really need to pull together as allies on that and support each other, and if at all possible, try to stop those attacks.
Leaders at the event emphasized that terrorism remains a shared global threat, one that has impacted multiple nations across continents. The repeated targeting of civilians has created a common understanding of the urgency needed to counter extremist networks. They highlighted that partnerships today are not just about economic or strategic interest, but also about building a united front against terrorism focused on prevention, preparedness, and swift response.
I'm here in particular because I really believe that we need to be united in education and resolve against terrorism, and there's so much that we share in terms of our democracy and how we come together in both economics but also in terms of values. And I think it is really important for us to stand united. I love the fact that the Embassy of India has really organize this. It's about remembrance, it's about accountability, and it's about collective action. And I think that we all have to step forward in collective action to combat terrorism everywhere across the world.
Taken together, these remarks reflect growing global impatience with regions and systems that allow terror networks to operate with impunity. The message is becoming increasingly clear. Counter-terrorism efforts cannot succeed unless there is accountability for those who enable, finance, or shelter such groups.
On April 22nd, India marked the anniversary of the Pahalgam terror attack, remembering the lives lost in one of Jammu and Kashmir's most chilling incidents. The attack once again exposed the continued threat of cross-border terrorism backed by Pakistan. Even after 1 year, the wounds remain fresh as families seek justice and the nation demands accountability. With global calls to curb terrorism growing louder, India has reiterated its stand that terror and talks cannot go together, sending a strong message against those supporting violence from across the border.
On April 22, 2025, Pak-backed terrorists struck in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir, targeting innocent people in a brutal attack that shocked the entire nation. As many as 26 people were killed in the assault, marking one of the deadliest attacks in the region. Civilians were signaled out and attacked on the basis of religion, creating panic in the tourist destination. The incident highlighted the persistent threat posed by terror groups operating with the support from across the border. On the anniversary of this brutal tragedy, the nation remembered the victims with grief and resolve. The silence of Pahalgam now carries echoes of that painful day, reminding the country of the human cost of terrorism. However, following the attack, India's response went beyond condemnation. The Pahalgam attack marked a turning point, triggering a decisive and calibrated response under what has come to be known as Operation Sindoor. India's message was clear: acts of terror would no longer go unanswered.
The Pahalgam terror attack, which completes 1 year, was a horrific and horrendous terrorist attack carried out by the Pakistani armed and trained terrorists, in which the victims were selected on religious profiling and killed in front of their lady wives, telling them to convey a message to the political leadership. India struck back strongly and swiftly, thereby establishing two main points. One, nuclear armed nations can go to war below the nuclear threshold. And two, modern wars and conflicts can be short and swift. Thereafter, Pakistan has not had the courage to carry out any major terrorist strike in India, because India has conveyed that Operation Sindoor is ongoing, and in case Pakistan dares any misadventure, it will be met with a befitting response. This has clearly changed the security architecture in Asia, especially in South Asia, where India has made it clear to any neighboring country which carries out any terrorist attack on India, the response would be equally befitting as was given to Pakistan.
Investigations and intelligence inputs over time have pointed towards the involvement of Pakistan-based terror outfits which continue to use Jammu and Kashmir as a theatre to push their agenda. Despite repeated warnings and evidence shared by India, Pakistan has consistently denied any role, even as terror networks are believed to find safe haven on its soil, a pattern of denial that has persisted for decades. This is why Operation Sindoor was conceived, not merely as a retaliation, but as a clear and decisive message that acts of terror would invite a strong and measured response.
If you look at the complete operation, it's a very good example as to how an enemy should be punished should he carry out any act which is against India's national interest. Not only we punished Pakistan heavily, but we also ensured that our aim of the war was very clear. We wanted to destroy the Pakistani terror camps, which were destroyed completely. We thereafter went in for conflict termination when we realized that we had achieved all our objectives.
Even a year after Operation Sindoor, questions remain over whether the international community has done enough to hold Pakistan accountable for its continued support to terror networks. While several countries condemned the attack and called for action against terrorism, experts believe the global response has largely remained limited to statements, falling short of sustained pressure needed to bring about any real change.
1 year after Operation Sindoor, has there been adequate international pressure by the world on Pakistan? The answer is very simple. While world per se did condemn Pakistan and issue statements condemning Pakistan's terror attack, but this has mostly been a lip service. Pressure to some extent does exist, but there is no enough pressure on Pakistan so that it abandons its path of violence and stops state-sponsored terrorism.
As India remembers the victims of the Pahalgam attack, the message remains firm. Terrorism emanating from across the border will not be tolerated. With Operation Sindoor, India has drawn a clear red line, signaling that any act of terror will be met with a decisive response. However, until Pakistan dismantles the terror infrastructure operating from its soil and is held accountable by the global community, the threat of cross-border terrorism is unlikely to fade. For India, the resolve is clear: zero tolerance for terrorism and unwavering commitment to protect its citizens.
Pakistan-backed terrorism has long remained a critical security challenge for India, with repeated incidents underscoring the persistence of cross-border infiltration and support to terror networks. The Pahalgam attack once again brought global attention to this issue, raising serious questions about accountability and the effectiveness of international pressure. To examine these issues in depth, we are joined by defense expert Anil Gaur. Sir, could you please first outline your assessment of Pakistan-linked terrorism and its continued impact on regional security?
See, Pakistan has kept terrorism as its state's policy, and this we can see from the very fact that India has suffered a lot, because since the 90s they have been carrying on this Operation Topak, wherein they sent in armed terrorists inside Kashmir to destabilize Kashmir and also try to wean away Kashmir from India, but which they were unsuccessful. And recently we have seen how the cadre of the Jamaat-e-Islamiyya and others of the organizations, and even the terrorist organizations, have been actively working in Bangladesh.
A year after the Pahalgam attack, has there been sufficient international pressure to hold states accused of backing terrorism accountable?
See, the problem here is that countries look at their own interests rather than seeing that what is the country with whom they are trying to protect is doing. Now, the entire world knows that Pakistan is a terror producing state and it has got terror factories within its country. Operation Sindoor proved it, because when the Indian forces targeted all the training camps plus the other hideouts of the terrorists, we have seen that when their janaza, what they call is that when their funeral ceremony was taking place, we saw high ranking army officers and politicians attending all those funeral ceremonies of these terrorists.
Has India's diplomatic strategy been effective in exposing and isolating networks linked to terrorism on global platforms?
See, India has been very successful in exposing Pakistan and all its links over there. But the only problem is that when it is being put to vote in the United Nations Security Council, China puts a hold on to whatever the proposal is there, or either vetoes it.
What more can be done both militarily and diplomatically to deter terror groups operating from across the border?
See, India has declared very well, our Prime Minister declared from the ramparts of the Red Fort on August 15 that Operation Sindoor is carrying on. It is in ceasefire mode. It has not been finished. And any incident of terror exported by Pakistan will invite the wrath of the Indian state. And this Pakistan knows very well, because in Operation Sindoor, when 11 airfields were crushed and damaged totally, their early warning systems were damaged, their radar systems were damaged, and of course the entire terrorist infrastructure, their camps and their residential homes and others were damaged, showed India's resolve. And this India has said it very clearly that in case now if Pakistan tries any thing to send in terrorists or try to destabilize India, the force of the Indian state will be such that the name of Pakistan and the shape of Pakistan will change. Diplomatically, India has taken it up with all the countries in the world, even in the United Nations. But like I said before, that vested interest of China prevents the world body from taking any decisions on Pakistan and declaring it a terrorist state.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us and sharing your insights. Moving on. Human rights violations in Sindh continue to draw sharp attention, particularly concerning minority communities. Reports of abductions, forced religious conversions, and coerced marriages of young girls have raised serious alarm among international observers. These concerns have now reached the global stage at the 25th session of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in New York, where demands for justice are increasingly being linked to calls for self-determination. Take a look.
Pakistan's Sindh province continues to face mounting criticism over human rights violations, particularly targeting minority communities. Incidents of kidnappings, forced religious conversions, and early marriages of young girls have been repeatedly reported by activists and watchdog groups. Beyond social injustices, concerns are also being raised over the exploitation of Sindh's vast natural resources, including gas, coal, and fertile agricultural land, while local populations continue to grapple with poverty, underdevelopment, and environmental degradation. Against this backdrop, the issue took center stage at the United Nations. At the 25th session of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, the World Sindhi Congress raised a strong call for international attention. Citing provisions under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the group urged the international community to move beyond symbolic support and ensure structural autonomy for the region.
Despite Sindh being the extremely rich in natural resources, including natural gas, coal, agricultural wealth, the Sindhi people systematically face severe resource appropriation, poverty, environmental degradation, and political marginalization. Acknowledging these inequalities is the first step to address the challenges outlined by UN. Identifying good practices within the UN system means moving beyond rhetorical support to actively empowering historically sovereign people and communities. For Sindhi nation, securing the right to self-determination is a paramount. It is only a structured mechanism that ensures that they can protect their historical lands, preserve their millennia-old heritage and language, and maintain democratic control over their natural wealth.
One of the most sensitive and widely reported concerns remains the alleged forced conversion of Sindhi girls, particularly from Hindu and other minority communities. Rights groups argue that many such cases involve coercion, intimidation, and legal loopholes that make it difficult for victims to seek justice. Families often allege that young girls are abducted, converted, and married under pressure with limited legal recourse. These incidents have sparked outrage among activists and diaspora groups who are calling for stricter enforcement of laws, protection of minors, and accountability for those responsible.
For years, World Sindhi Congress has consistently fought against the human rights violations targeting Sindhi people, particularly the forced conversions of Sindhi Hindu girls. We have submitted numerous contributions to the Universal Periodic Review, and just recently we presented our case at the 61st session of the UN Human Rights Council. The UN's recent report highlights a devastating reality. In 2025, 75% of girls and women affected by forced conversion through marriage were Hindu, and 25% were Christian. Almost 80% of these incidents occurred in the province of Sindh in Pakistan.
The developments have intensified global scrutiny of Pakistan's human rights record, with critics accusing Islamabad of failing to protect its minority communities and address systemic injustices in Sindh. Despite repeated allegations, meaningful action on the ground remains limited, raising serious questions about accountability, governance, and political will. As these concerns echo at international forums like the United Nations, pressure is mounting on Pakistan to move beyond denial and deliver concrete reforms before the credibility gap widens further on the global stage.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We will be back next week with more news, views, and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Akansha Parimu signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.